Hello, this is the Jay Show, and I'm Jay Smith, your host. And I have with me the very beautiful Hatun Tash, who has agreed to come as an expert to talk about really what the Quran and the problems we're finding with the Quran. In the last show, we already showed these 26 Qurans. Some of them are here, the others are around here. 26 different Qurans that are different from this one right here. This is the one we use today. This is the official one. This is the one that every Muslim has been told is the same all over the world, and that the Arabic part is exactly the same. Doesn't matter where you are, if you're in Indonesia, if you're here in Britain, if you're in Somalia, if you're up in the Middle East, it is always the same Quran. And the reason they have to say this is that this comes from an eternal tablet that sits in heaven, that's always been there in heaven. It has always been, it has always existed. So it cannot have had any human intervention.
Plus, Quran makes a claim that Allah is going to protect the book. So if Quran has been changed, has been corrupted, then it puts Allah in a situation that Allah wasn't capable to keep His word.
Oh, okay. So this is a theological problem as well.
It will be a theological problem.
Huge theological problem. Now, we don't have that problem with the Bible, do we?
We don't, thanks God.
We know that it's written by men. We know who the men were. We know when it was written. It was written over a period of 1,400 years. Let's say 1,500 years, because you have about a century in the first century which the New Testament was written. But from Moses writing in 1400 BC all the way up to John would be the last thing to have been written in the New Testament, possibly at the end of the first century. So 1,500 years, we know who wrote them. We know that these are not in heaven. We know they're not on any eternal tablets. We know that they were not sent down piecemeal by Angel Gabriel to each individual. There's about really 30 different authors in 3 languages on 3 continents for the New Testament and the Old Testament. We would never make the claims Muslims make.
Yeah, so our claims regarding the Bible is the inspired word of God. Jesus is the eternal word of God. Bible is the witnessed word of God, which is written by human being, and Yahweh inspired human beings to write everything down. Versus Muslim claims regarding the Quran is the eternal speech of Allah, is the eternal word of Allah, and everything in the Quran is how it's supposed to be. So dot to dot is exactly the same. It came down, and in time of Muhammad, when Muhammad died in 632, revelation finished.
So they've put the Quran on such a high pedestal. It's way up here. It is above criticism. It's above human intervention. It has to remain sacrosanct. Inimitable is the word they love to use. Can you see then why no one dares say that maybe there may be human intervention? If you begin to intimate that, immediately you're going to get an awful lot of angry Muslims, are you not?
Yeah.
Not Christians.
That can be understandable, though.
Because our Bible, we know our Bible does have interventions. We know that it was written by men. We know that it got changed at different places, but we know exactly where the changes are.
Yeah,
we know where
as we talked about, we can get the critical edition version of the Bible, and then we can see all the comparison done with the manuscripts. Yet, 2017, we don't have the critical version of the Quran.
Okay, now let's back up. Let's say, when did this whole thing begin? When did this idea that the Quran was compiled by Uthman, where did that come from? That idea that it was put together by this caliph means a king, who had the control over that part of the world at that time. Where do we get that idea that he was the one that inspired that? And we're going to put up on the screen that slide so people can see what we're talking about. And if you could unpack that slide for them, the traditional account, where does this account come from? We'll put it on the slide so you can see it, and you can then unpack it, what that slide's talking about.
So information come to us approximately 250 years after death of Muhammad, and it comes to us approximate place called Uzbekistan. Bukhari is from Uzbekistan.
So it's Bukhari. And you can see there in the blue there on the slide, in that little cloud formation, there is Sahih Bukhari. And the compilation, it's 870 AD. So we're talking about 240 years after Muhammad's death. He writes this down.
He compiles from
the people. It.
And we know Arabic wasn't Bukhari's first language, so he learned Arabic in his lifetime, and then he traveled, he met with people, and then he found out how the Quran came to be. So Sahih Bukhari, volume 6, book 61, hadith 509 and 500 tells us. Hudayfa bin al-Yaman came to Uthman at the time when the people of Sham and the people of Iraq were waging war to conquer Armenia and Azerbaijan. So there is war between people of Sham and people of Iraq. Yet when we actually look at the informations outside of the hadith, we see approximately 70 people died from this war. And during this war, some Muslims called other Muslims kafir.
Okay,
That's
it says that
just
in the next
side
sentence.
information.
Hudayfa was afraid of their, that is the people of Sham and Iraq,
Yeah.
differences in the recitation of the Quran.
Yeah.
So there was a fear already that maybe the Quran would have different. Hold on a minute. If this comes from God, automatic. If it comes from heaven, automatic. This suggests that there may be human intervention already.
Yes, but please remember, while during the war, Muslims are calling other Muslims kafir, non-believer, because the way they recite the Quran. Yet, it's only 70 people who dies in this battle.
Let me continue on. Oh, and it says to Uthman, O chief of the believers, save this nation before they differ about the book, that means the Quran,
Yep.
as Jews and the Christians did before. So therefore Uthman sent a message to Hafsa. Now remember, Hafsa
Yep.
is who?
So, Hafsa is the daughter of Umar, also wife of Muhammad.
Okay.
But they sent people to Hafsa because time of Uthman, there is already one complete Quran.
Time
which
of
is,
Abu Bakr, there was
no,
one complete.
from the time of Uthman, he already had a complete Quran, which was given to Hafsa from Abu Bakr.
Okay, so at the
From
time
Umar,
of Abu
sorry.
Bakr,
Yeah.
632, 634, a Quran had been compiled by Zayd ibn Thabit,
Yeah.
and that was given to the wife Hafsa.
So-
She put it under her bed, according to tradition.
Yes.
So that's what it's referring to.
Yeah, so
Go to Hafsa,
yeah,
he says.
Uthman is sending people to Hafsa to get that
That
compiled
Quran. Let's move on. Send us that manuscript of the Quran so that we may compile the Quranic materials in perfect copies and return the manuscripts to you. That means to Hafsa.
Yeah, so hold on a minute. That tells us while there was a Quran exist in the time of Hafsa, with Hafsa, still that Quran is not perfect. So approximately 20 years after the death of Muhammad, they are trying to bring a perfect copy.
Why could they just use Hafsa's? Why can't it be the official one?
That's not perfect. It already tells us there is a problem
So
with people.
you're saying also that there may have been something wrong with Hafsa's copy.
If it was Hafsa's copy, all right, then they would burn everything else and then use the Hafsa's
And
copy.
we can see that
Yeah.
because what we're going to read next.
Yeah.
Hafsa sent it to Uthman. Uthman then ordered Zayd bin Thabit, Abdullah bin Zubair, Said bin Al-As, and Abdurrahman bin Harith. So there are four others, bin
Yeah.
Harith bin Hisham. So there are four others, along with Zayd bin Thabit. Remember, Zayd bin Thabit is the one that wrote the one that Hafsa had.
Yeah.
He was the one that wrote it way back 20 years earlier in 632.
Yep.
So this is the same Zayd bin Thabit. We know him as the scribe or the secretary of Muhammad.
Yep.
Here he's asked by Uthman to take that copy on three others, Zubair, Alas, and Ibn Hisham, Harith Hisham.
Yep.
There are two, then, what does it say next? Let's read. To rewrite the manuscripts in perfect copies. All right, so just copy it like a photocopy over and over again. But wait a minute. Uthman said to the three Qurayshi men, in case you disagree with Zayd bin Thabit on any point, then write it in the dialect of the Quraysh. The Quran was revealed in their tongue. Hold on a minute. If you're just copying, how can you disagree?
That is already the problem. By the time this event takes place, there is already a problem. People are already disagreeing what is in the Quran, what's supposed to be in the Quran or not. Because in the battle, people are calling each other kafir. And it's not like only small changings. And Uthman makes very clear statement. He's not the prophet or anything. He says, Quran is revealed in the dialect of Quraysh.
Okay. So let's open up this book. This is that book right here. I give it to you. You're Zayd bin Thabit. Here is Hafsa's copy.
Yeah.
I want you now to write this down exactly as you've seen it in another book.
I can't do that.
Why not?
Because there is already problem with this written Quran. People are already disagreeing with what it is written. So there is a reason these four people come together to make one perfect Quran.
Okay, then it says, if you disagree.
Yeah.
So the assumption is there's going to be disagreement.
Yeah.
Write it in the Qurayshi dialect.
Yes.
Okay, help me here. Qurayshi dialect. Dialectical differences in Arabic require what?
Vowels.
They require vowels.
Yeah.
There are only three vowels, really.
Yeah.
There's long and there's short of them, but there is the dhamma, which is the
Yeah.
u sound.
Dhamma,
There
fatha.
is the fatta, which is the ah sound,
Yeah.
and there is a kasra, which is the e sound.
Yeah.
The dhamma and the fatta are put above the letter. The kasra is put below the letter.
The problem is, sorry, always problems, but in the time of Uthman, in the time of Muhammad, in the time of Uthman, Arabic alphabet didn't have those vowels.
Okay, well then why is he saying you have dialectic and do it in the Qurayshi dialect? If there was no vowels to delineate dialectical differences in the Arabic, then how can this be true?
Remember, I told you, Bukhari wrote the hadith approximately 250 years after the death of Muhammad.
So this is what would have been the case in the 9th century.
Yes, when Bukhari looks back, he says, oh, okay, like, he doesn't put together, oh, in 650s we didn't have the vowels. He doesn't put them
He's
together.
not thinking historically.
Yeah.
This is the historical critique that we're looking for. This should have been done by Bukhari. Bukhari should have had a historical edition already in place.
Yeah.
So he's already saying, let me think what the problems would be today in the 9th century. And one of the big problems is we have different dialects.
Yeah.
So you need to read it in this dialect, the Qurayshi dialect. He didn't realize you can't say that in the 7th century. Vowels had not been invented.
Yeah.
There were no dama, kasra, and fatha. That had yet to be invented. They were only introduced in the 8th century. You see a problem already we're finding with
Sad
this
that,
compilation.
Imam didn't know that.
Okay, then it says, they did so, and when they had written many copies, Uthman returned the original manuscript to Hafsa, gave it back to her, and then Uthman sent to every Muslim province one copy of what they had copied.
What happens here is they made one perfect Quran, they copied this perfectly, and then this Quran went to different cities with one person. We will look at which cities it went later. But this hadith doesn't tell us which cities, it just tells us it went to every Muslim provinces.
Look on the screen. I want you now to look at the cities. We've got them listed there on the right side.
Yeah.
Look at them. Uthman sent to every Muslim province one copy, one to Basra, one to Baghdad, one to Damascus, one to Jerusalem, another to Cairo, another to Alexandria, another to Aden, another to Herat, and another to Nishapur. What we're talking about is, how many do you have there? That means you have 9 copies going to 9 cities.
So Uthman doesn't tell us, or Sahih Bukhari doesn't tell us which cities they sent. Islamic tradition is very confused how many copies went to which cities. But when we look at the map, when we look at the history, we see in 7th century, in time of Uthman, there were 9 provinces.
And these are the 9 provinces
Those
we
are
just
the
read.
9 provinces.
So that means 9 copies.
With 9 person.
At least with each one with a 9. What do you mean by that?
Like 1 copy with 1 person.
So someone would actually carry it.
Because someone who know the Quran, someone who know what it is, so they would take it that people don't get, there is no disagreement when Quran arrived to Basra.
To guard it, in sense. To make sure that it remains sacrosanct.
Yeah, probably teach someone because you kind of made it one perfect copy. So you arrive to Basra, people will come and ask you about the Quran. What you do, you are teaching the Quran what you already brought with you.
So what you're saying already is that this should have been done way back in the 7th century. In fact, it was done way back in the 7th century.
According to tradition, around 650s.
There should be no problems in whatsoever with any differences in Qurans. Now let's go back to that, could finish off that tradition. So they sent it out, Zayd ibn Thabit, now Uthman sent to every Muslim province one copy, and ordered that all the other Quranic materials, whether written in fragmentary manuscript or whole copies, be burnt.
I think it is one of the saddest things in Islamic tradition. If you authorize to make one perfect Quran, why are you so scared? What are the other manuscripts out there? So other manuscripts probably were disagreeing what was there. So Uthman says, okay, we just ignore them. He orders to burn everything. It comes from a Muslim who is leader of the country, ordered to burn their own manuscripts.
That says 2 things to me right away. That means there must have been some discrepancies.
Yeah.
Why would you burn them if they all agreed? Proving the very reason why they had, Uthman had to bring Zayd ibn Thabit, Harith, Alas, and Zubair, all the 4 of them together to rewrite that copy that was Hafsa's. Obviously there was discrepancies. Otherwise, why would you take all the remaining fragments and burn them? So now we have, everything is like this. It's like an upside down pyramid. We have one original Quran now that's created by Uthman that should be exactly the same, right? The problem is, let's take a look at the Bible. The Bible, we don't burn any of our manuscripts.
We were burned for our manuscripts.
Okay, they were burned by others.
non-Christians order Christians to burn their manuscripts, or Christians get to burn for their manuscripts.
The Edict of Diocletian in 300 did just that. The Romans burned our manuscripts, and we had thousands of manuscripts burned. But Christians, can you tell me any place that we have destroyed or burned or thrown away any of the biblical codices or manuscripts?
No.
Do you know of any occasion where that happened?
I don't know. The strange thing is, it is coming from the people who are the leading the country, who are the governing the country, and they are Muslim. They are in the power, with using their power to say, okay, now we are going to burn every manuscript which is outside this perfect Quran.
Now, Muslims have always said to me that you have many, many, many Bibles, and there was one Bible that was chosen. I get this story all the time. At the time of Constantine, in the 4th century, about 325. And in fact, at the Council of Nicaea is where they always say it. In 325, in Nicaea, they put on a table like we have here. They put 200 Bibles on. And then they started shaking. Have you heard this story? They shook and shook and shook and shook and shook until they all fell off. And the one that remained is the Bible that we have today. I've heard this for 35 years.
Gospel stays on the thing.
This is the one that we use today. Interestingly, it looks like that story that Muslims are creating actually is very similar to what we're getting here. There was no table and no shaking.
Yeah, they are just putting their tradition on Christian history. In Christian history, nothing happened. Nothing such the story you told happened.
In fact, the Council of Nicaea had nothing to do with canonization. The Council of Nicaea had to do with Arianism, had to do with actually what Islam follows, the fact that Arianists believed that Jesus was nothing more than a man, like Muslims believe. And Athanasius confronted Arianism. That's why the council was created, and that's what it argued. So it has nothing to do with whether a Bible was created or when the canon existed. But now we're talking about the first canonization. And canon means when the original Quran was finally formed. Now, here's the second problem. Okay, so you throw out all the manuscripts because they all disagree.
Yeah.
I would like to have known where they disagree, wouldn't you? I would like to know why is it that if there are any corrections, what's going on here? Wouldn't it have been better if he had preserved everything so that today we could look at all of them like you see the ones we have on here, and that one disagrees with this one, disagrees with that one, disagrees with this one, so that we could actually look at them.
If you think like this, for example, Jay, in the 1st century, people wrote the Gospels. They wrote letter to one another.
Yeah.
In 2nd century, people wrote Gospels. They wrote letter to one another.
Yeah.
Bible has been seen by people, for example, New Testament, as this is the Word of God, this is the continuation of the Bible. And then we've got 4 Gospels, 4 biography of Jesus is in the Bible. Yet we've got lots of writings outside of the Bible, which is not canonized, which is not seen as this is the Word of God. But we didn't burn them. They are accessible to everyone. Even though we had the biographies of Jesus, which not agree what is in the Bible, yet we kept them.
We kept them. We didn't even destroy them. The Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Judas. If you look at the Sinaiticus of this, the Sinaiticus manuscript that is here in the British Library, at the back of it are 2 extra pieces of literature, the Epistle of Barnabas and also the Shepherd of Hermes. These are 2 authoritative books. They're not canonical. They're not part of the canon. They were not part of the original Bible, but they were included because they agreed with the biblical text.
So we didn't burn them, or we didn't order people to burn them. So still they exist and accessible to everyone. Yet, Quran, which is the eternal word of Allah, a caliph who never met Allah, who never met the angel, find authority to burn the word of God where people wrote in the manuscripts.
That's fascinating. So here you're talking all kinds of human intervention. This is what we need to know. This is how you find a critical edition. You look back and see where humans have intervened, where humans have changed, where they've ejected, where they've emitted, where they've rescinded, where they've added, where they have taken away. That's exactly how you come to a cross and how you get to a critical edition. So we're doing that right now between us just by reading their own text. This is nothing you wrote, Hatun. This is nothing that I've written.
It comes from Sahih Bukhari. It's from Islamic sources.
Sahih means perfect. There's no error.
True, reliable.
So this is the best they've got. And then it goes on and says, They burnt down the ones that didn't agree. They sent the others to all the province. We know there's 9 prophets.
Yeah.
Then Zaid ibn Thabit added, a verse from Surah Azab was missed by me when I copied the Quran, and I used to hear Allah's apostle reciting it. So we searched for it and found it with Khuzaimah ibn Thabit al-Ansari. And that verse was, among the believers are men who have been true in their covenant with Allah, Surah 33, Ayah 23.
Yeah.
So here, hold on a minute. Here is Zaid ibn Thabit, the man, this is not Muhammad. This is not the Caliph Uthman. This is just a scribe, a secretary. Say, oh, wait a minute. I remember another verse that I remember the Prophet saying 20 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know where it is. So he starts looking all over for it. And he comes across this one man who remembers it.
Yeah, but the thing is, so that verse probably wasn't in the Hafsa's Quran. Because if it was in Hafsa's Quran, it would be copied. Or if it was with the people who were in the committee, who were on the table, were discussing what needs to get into the Quran or not. None of those people remember. And then he just gives us one name and then tells, oh, I remember this person remembered, and then I put it in the Quran.
Oh, wait, one name.
One person.
What are you supposed to have in order to have something that's authoritative in Islam?
2 people,
You
minimum.
need to have 2 witnesses. In fact, there are some Muslims that you know today that will not accept Surah 33, Ayah 23, because it only has one witness.
Yeah, and same thing for the Surah 9, verse 128 and 129.
Surah 9, verse 128 and 129 also only have 1 witnesses,
Yeah.
and they throw those 2 verses out, plus Surah 33, Ayah 23, because it only has 1 witness. And we know that because it's right here in Sahih Bukhari.
Yeah, actually it's worse than that, because if we read certain passages, hadiths, it tells us Surah 33, which is the surah which is mentioned here, it was as long as Surah Baqarah, as long as Surah 2,
Which is the largest one in the whole Quran.
296 or 76 verses.
I'll look it up right now. Go ahead. Keep speaking while I look it up.
It's approximately 213 verses is missing. So Surah 33 we are reading today is only 73 or 76 verses, yet Surah Baqarah is 296 verses. Only 73 verses of
286 verses.
286 verses. So approximately 213 verses of this. Yes, Surah 33 was as long as Surah 2, 286
So we're missing
verses.
quite a few verses here.
213 verses is missing.
213 verses are missing. Ouch,
And we are
ouch,
grateful.
ouch.
We are grateful that
Sahih Bukhari said this.
Yeah, Zaid bin Thabit, remember, oh, there was 1 verse, let me add it to there. So otherwise it would be 214 verses.
Now we're pulling up an awful lot here, Hatun. We've gone through already that there are some real difficulties. We're already with the readings. We're already going into, and that there are already differences because of the Battle of Yamama.
Yeah.
People were dying, and therefore they had to write the first Quran. Now we've come to the time of Uthman 20 years later, and now Uthman has to rewrite it again. So he gets the format. The man that wrote the Hafsa's copy had the Hafsa's copy in front of them. They rewrite it. If there's any disagreement, we find out that they're going to have to use the dialect of the Quraysh, which you now know and I know could not have existed in the 7th century. But it gets even worse than that, because now we're finding out that after they did compile these 9 copies, send them to those 9 cities, those 9 provinces, then he says, take everything else and burn it, so there's nothing that will incriminate Uthman or Zaid ibn Thabit. And yet, then on top of that, he's thinking, hold on a minute, there's one verse that I remember, one man said, and he goes Khuzaimah, he finds him, and he finds that verse, and it turns out to be Surah 33, Ayah 23. So you can unpack this, all kinds of problems with this. Can you now understand why so many people have problems with the traditions? But let's just look at the map, and let's see where we're going to look at. And let's see and where these things are. We're going to, in just a bit, we're going to bring up a map for you. But as I go to it right now, I want you to unpack where these places are that they're going to. And let's just take a look at that map.
As we looked at the Hadith doesn't tell us which cities, which provinces Uthman sent the Quran. We don't know. And Islamic tradition is kind of in-house debates. No one knows exactly where are those cities. But history tells us there were 9 provinces in the time of Uthman.
Okay.
So some of the commentaries talks about this, and then they give us only 4 places.
Okay.
They give us only 4 places. If you look at the map, so there is 1 Quran in Medina, Zaid bin Thabit.
Okay, let me just, this is one here. I'm just make a circle around it. Okay.
Yeah. And then we've got 1 Quran to Basra.
Okay, that's this one right here.
Yeah, by Amir ibn Abdul Koyas. And then we've got we've got 1 in Kufa.
There's Kufa, there it is.
Yeah.
So these are both in what would be today Iraq.
Yes.
The southern part of Iraq, and Kufa is closer to Baghdad.
Yeah.
Okay, those.
And then one to Damascus.
Okay, and that's the Damascus way over here.
Yeah.
Okay.
So now we kind of see from the traditions. Tradition tells us, okay, this person take the Quran there, and then we know, for example, when the Zayd bin Thabit died.
Okay.
Or we've got other traditions. They tell us maybe it was 5 copies.
Oh, okay. So here we now look up on the slide again.
Yeah.
We got 5 now.
Yeah. So 1 copy was sent to Mecca.
Okay.
Extra by Abdullah bin
I
Said.
just circled it there.
Yeah.
Plus the other 4.
Yes, plus the other 4.
So now we've got a 5th one that's been added
Yeah.
to the other 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we get this information from As-Suyuti or Ibn Hajj.
Ibn Hajj, I should look at
Yeah.
the dates.
So they are like 15th century or 10th century.
6th century and 15th century. Okay. All right.
And then next map shows actually people are so confused now. Was it 6 copies? Was it 7 copies? They don't know. So in this map, so we've got the 4 originals, which talks about Basra, Kufa, Damascus, and Medina. And then we've got the Mecca one. Okay. And then someone says, oh, there is one Uthman kept with himself. So he has the personal copy. So it ended up we having 6 copies.
Now we're up to 6 copies.
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course, tradition more confused. We read around 900s in 9th century, sorry.
868.
Yeah. So we've got all those 6 copies, okay? Plus, Otto is not sure if there was another copy which was sent to Yemen, okay, which is down on the map.
Here, I've just circled it.
Yeah. Or Yemen, or there is another copy, Egypt or Bahrain.
Bahrain. I'm just going to search Bahrain, and
And
there's
then
Egypt.
So tradition is not sure. For example, it might be some people say it's Egypt, some people say no, it's Bahrain, but like for sure we don't know.
Now that's 9. So it could be 9 different provinces. It could be 6. It could be 5. It could be 4. There's a lot of confusion going on here, and this needs to come out. What we're doing now, Hatun, and what you've helped me with, this has been great. Thanks for coming on board. This has unpacked an awful lot. We've brought up an awful lot of problems. Let's try to list them. The first problem is there is nothing written down during Muhammad's death.
Yes.
This is rather, and we said this from the very beginning, why did not Muhammad have it written down? We're not saying he had to write it, because according to tradition, he could not read or write. That's up to dispute. Nonetheless, why did he write this down himself? Why did he have Zayd ibn Thabit write it down? Since he was receiving it, and we do know that they could read and write in that period. Listen, there's a whole library that existed in Alexandria in the 5th century. Certainly by the 7th century when Muhammad was living, in that part of the world they could read and write. Isn't that funny? Why would God, in all his providence and all his wisdom, have picked a man who could not even read and write to give the greatest revelation in the history of mankind?
Yeah.
Nonetheless, so he didn't write it down. That we do know it was not written down. Tradition tells us it was not written down in 632 when he died.
Yeah.
That had to be written down by Zayd ibn Thabit during the time of Abu Bakr, the next 2 years. That was given to Hafsa. She put it under her bed. Why she did? If this is the greatest revelation, why wasn't it copied
accessible
immediately?
to everyone?
Why didn't Abu Bakr send it to all the different provinces? He should have done it right away. Obviously, there was some reason why they must have hidden it. So 20 years later, roughly 20 years later, Uthman comes to power. He realizes there's a problem, that there are now different Qurans. And I think the reason why is they didn't have Hafsa's to look at. So that's why he then gets Hafsa's Quran, gives it to Zayd ibn Thabit along with 3 others, and they rewrite the Quran. We've got a real problem here. We've seen now that there are not only 9 that were finally written and sent to the 9 provinces, Basra, Baghdad, Damascus, Jerusalem, Cairo, Alexandria, Aden, Herat, and Nishapur. So those are the 9 that we should have 9 today. So we're going to unpack that. What we do know is that when these were then finally, these 9 were written, sent off to 9 countries with people to take them and to hold them and to make sure that they don't get disturbed or deranged or changed, and then we find all the other material is burnt, destroyed.
Yep.
And yet there's still one verse that he hadn't come across. Hatun, this has been great. It's been terrific. We need to wrap it up here because we're going to now come back to the major problem in the next series, and that is now let's look and see whether or not they really have continued, those 9 copies did continue to be the exact same even today. God bless you. It's good to have you here. Thanks for joining us. Continue to come with us as we now unpack these 26 Qurans in the next segment. This is Jay then, over and out.